Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Tindal. I'm a senior architect here at Insight. My area of focus is VMware's NSX networking practice, and that includes both the networking and security portions of that. And with me is Corey Carose, which I forgot to put his name on the front on the introduction slide, but Corey, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Corey Carose. I'm one of our senior solution architects on our data center and cloud transformation practice here at Insight.
All right. Thank you, Corey. So getting into it a bit here, I wanted to first talk a little bit about the state of things today and why perimeter security is no longer enough. And then next, we're going to dive into the mechanics of a breach. And I want to give you an anatomical breakdown, really, which will hopefully not only be interesting, but will help illustrate where we, as Insight, can help with our vast portfolio of expertise. Then we'll get into ways that we can mitigate these security risks. We're going to be focused on one solution, like I said in the beginning there, and that's VMware's NSX-T virtualized networking and security solution. It helps to understand some statistics around why perimeter security isn't enough in today's threat landscape. These statistics represent some of the reasons why. So first, email continues to be used as the most common attack vector to gain initial access, within more than 4% of all business emails analyzed containing a malicious component. Malicious email authors are clever and relentless, and they are constantly developing new or at least different ways to deceive and attack us. Although malicious payloads found in email-based attacks frequently change, the vast majority of cyber criminals continue to reuse the same basic strategies. Perimeter security solutions such as antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-phishing tools are ineffective against advanced email-based threats, and malicious actors will continue to use email as an attack vector because of this. Second, more than half of all malicious artifacts analyzed were delivered via zip archive. So attackers continue to weaponize zip file attachments with malicious content. And many security solutions treat password-protected zip files as encrypted files and bypass the inspection. A more modern sandboxing tool is needed, one that can deconstruct and understand as many file types as possible. Third, more than 75% of lateral movement events identified were conducted using remote desktop protocol, or RDP, often using stolen credentials to log into other hosts on the network. So when attackers compromise an asset in a network, that device usually is not their ultimate destination. To accomplish their goal, these bad actors need to target low-level web servers, email accounts, employee endpoint devices, or other vulnerable devices. They'll then move laterally throughout the environment from this initial compromise point through the network to reach their intended target. You've probably heard of this as a pivot attack. And then fourth, more than half of the network anomalies detected are unusual beaconing, followed by connections on suspicious ports and anomalous connections between two hosts. So unusual beaconing constantly emits a signal to its intended target. Most communications with a beacon happen in the clear. They aren't encrypted, and attackers are increasingly using this as a gateway within your data center. Identifying and flagging abnormal beaconing is one of the most effective threat detection and prevention methods an enterprise security team can utilize. And finally, the most common bad security practice is the use of clear text passwords. These security events are entirely preventable. If you're espousing clear text passwords over the network, you're providing the attackers the keys to your kingdom and enabling them to move laterally and exfiltrate data. So let's break it down a little bit and look at the anatomy of a breach. First, attackers need to gain initial access into an environment. So what is the weakest link in any security model? That would be the users. They're the ones who download malware from compromised links in their email or spoof website, like I was just talking about, and inadvertently aid attackers in gaining access. I was just talking to a colleague the other day, and we were joking around, and he said he could provision a 100% secure and pristine network if only it wasn't for the users and the applications he needed to include in that network. However, users aren't the only weak points. And I've seen this a lot of times, but attackers love exploiting any vulnerable surface they can access or get access to, primarily unpatched systems. Yet it's not always as simple as that forgotten unpatched Windows 2000 machine that's hiding out on a VLAN somewhere with hundreds of virtual machines on that same VLAN, just waiting to be exploited. You can think of that as like the ground zero of the exploit. Attackers continue to increase their level of sophistication exponentially. For example, with the recent SolarWinds breach, they actually compromised the supply chain of a commercial application and injected a backdoor directly into the code of a site update package. Once the attacker has gained access, established persistence, and command and control, the active attack phase starts. This is where attackers try to escalate their privileges in order to execute their full objective. They employ techniques to avoid detection, of course, things like uninstalling or otherwise impairing firewalls or antivirus software on endpoints, or masquerading to avoid detection from other defenses that defenders use to audit activity and identify potential malicious behavior. Adversaries could also target event aggregation and analysis mechanisms or otherwise disrupt these procedures by altering system components. All of this so they can start scanning the network to find additional accessible attack surfaces. So if you want kind of a more look into this, you can look at attack.mitre.org. If you haven't looked at that, it's a great resource and website to check it out. We can send out a link to that afterwards. But yeah. So finding additional accessible attack surfaces or moving laterally through an environment is a very critical step for these guys. This is where attackers try to use pivoting techniques in order to move from one system to another. The point, of course, is to gain access to sensitive target systems and valuable data. Once they have access, they begin the process of exfiltration using obfuscated techniques over obfuscated channels that, unless you have the right security solutions in place, you will never even see. For example, they like using DNS to get the data out without being blocked by a firewall or without looking suspicious. While attackers may use the most extensive and most complicated techniques in order to gain initial access into the environment, the initial target of an attack is almost never the actual objective. It is because of this that the majority of attacks are so dependent on some form of east-west lateral movement inside the data center. These pivot attacks are often quite slow to execute too. However, luckily for the attackers, it often takes more than 209 days on average for a breach to be identified, which gives attackers plenty of time and plenty of opportunity to extract the data they need. Not only that, it leaves plenty of time for them to hide their activity afterwards, so you never even know they were there. If you never knew they were there, you might not patch the systems they used to gain access in the first place, which lets them come back whenever they want and then come and go as they please, essentially farming your environment for data. The main point here is that attackers spend the majority of their time within your environment on the active attack phase, moving laterally throughout the environment and happily extracting all the data they want. This is because the majority of security solutions and the majority of security investment is still focused on the perimeter. So I've done a fair number of network assessments using another tool from VMware called VMware vRealize Network Insight. And one of the things that always strikes me when I do these assessments is the amount of north-south traffic in a customer environment versus the amount of east-west traffic. In most cases, it's something like 1 to 3% north-south and 99 to 97% east-west. So it always made me wonder why the majority of customer security spend is so focused on that 1 to 3% of overall network traffic. So it doesn't really matter how much you spend there. Attackers will still figure out a way through perimeter defenses. It's just what they do. And one reason is for this is because an estimated 60% of breaches involve unpatched system vulnerabilities. And the crazy thing about that is often there was a patch available, it just hadn't been applied yet. And this illustrates another problem, which is the constant battle within organizations as they struggle to maintain security on one side and a revenue-generating application on the other, which goes back to that conversation I had with my colleague about how if it wasn't for users and applications, things could remain pristine and extremely secure. So what do we do about this? How do we deal with these threats? Luckily, there's a solution from VMware called NSX-T, which offers a full suite of advanced threat prevention capabilities. You've probably heard the term defense in depth, right? NSX Advanced Threat Prevention can defend against these sorts of attacks after they penetrate the perimeter. VMware acquired LastLine back in the summer of 2020. And if you haven't heard of LastLine, they're a pioneer in anti-malware research and network detection and response. This acquisition gives VMware a complete suite of advanced threat prevention capabilities, including a novel sandbox technology, network traffic analytics, and distributed and behavioral-based IDS/IPS to provide complete network visibility, detection, and prevention of advanced threats. This robust management and analytics framework is backed by threat intelligence from the VMware Threat Analysis Unit, or TAU, which brings together threat research teams from Carbon Black, the LastLine acquisition, as well as the already robust teams at VMware responsible for pioneering microsegmentation using the NSX distributed firewall, which I'm hoping you guys are familiar with. It's been around for quite a while. So with the acquisition of LastLine, VMware advanced its threat research capabilities and accelerated the customer journey towards true intrinsic security. LastLine gave VMware world-class threat research from a renowned group of academic cybersecurity researchers and advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning threat detection capabilities that deliver some of the highest levels of efficacy in the security industry. Before we get into the newer advanced threat prevention components of NSX-T, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the original security function within NSX. And that was there from the very beginning. And it was a thing that really revolutionized the way data centers do security. This is the thing that brought the word microsegmentation to the forefront of everyone's minds back in 2012 when VMware acquired Nicira. Before NSX introduced the idea of a distributed firewall, we relied on a sort of distributed model using security appliances residing on each ESXi host. I was there back in the day doing consulting. I don't know how many of you might remember a product called vCNS or vCloud Networking and Security, but yeah. So the distributed firewall has continued to evolve, and its capability of now provides consistent and dynamically defined security policy based on compute objects or tags, which allows workloads to seamlessly span across multiple platforms, whether they are on-prem or in the cloud, all secured by a stateful firewall that resides on the VNIC of each workload. This gives our customers the ability to build a truly zero-trust security framework within their data center that can be enhanced using some of the new NSX native advanced threat prevention technologies or to integrate with your favorite security vendor. NSX Advanced Threat Prevention detects and prevents sophisticated threats from entering or operating in a network and consists of three key components. First, VMware's intrusion detection and prevention system uses signatures tailored to the applications. This allows NSX to effectively protect against a very wide range of known attacks and exploits. Second, NSX employs an innovative sandbox that provides an in-depth view of what a program is attempting to do, which helps detect and prevent zero-day malware. Third, NSX leverages network traffic analytics to identify unwanted network behaviors. This allows us to detect threats that attempt to break into a network, move laterally, and exfiltrate stolen information. NSX Advanced Threat Prevention Network Detection and Response provides the network visibility to aggregate alerts across multiple assets and provides a security analyst with a high-level blueprint of all ongoing network intrusions. So let's look at each of these a little bit closer. Intrusion detection and prevention systems scan network traffic for signs of attacks. They do this by leveraging signatures that are matched against packet payloads. What is great about VMware's IDS system are two things. First, VMware's IDS is distributed and runs on each host. Second, VMware has a rich context about the workloads that run on each of these hosts. This allows us to precisely tailor the signature sets that are deployed. In other words, we only load those signatures into the IDS that are relevant for the workloads on the host that this IDS protects. So following me. In this example here, we have an IDS with a database that contains around 13,000 signatures. We inspect the host on top and find it runs MySQL. As a result, we can pick only 26 signatures that apply to MySQL, and we can set aside thousands of other signatures that do not matter for MySQL. A similar process is applied to the other nodes and workloads as well. Using a small and tailored subset of signatures for each host allows us to radically reduce false positives and better streamline your SOC operations. Also, there is a much smaller chance of an accidental signature match, which leads to much fewer false positives. Now let's look at the NSX Sandbox. What is unique about NSX's Sandbox is that it uses full system emulation to analyze programs. This allows us to see all instructions that a process executes. Compare this to a traditional sandbox, which can only observe the interactions between a program and the underlying operating system. That is, a traditional sandbox treats a program as a black box. However, VMware can break open this box and peek inside. So why does this matter? So in the example here, we see in green the interactions that a traditional sandbox might observe. The program under analysis asks the operating system for a list of running processes. It reads and writes some files, and then opens a network connection. Is that bad? It's hard to tell. Now let's compare this to what VMware's Sandbox sees. In orange, we see that the program uses a list of running processes to check for a specific name, a string that indicates the presence of a traditional sandbox. We see an individual CPU instruction that is often used for evasion. We also see that the program encrypts the data that it has read from the files using a known ransomware algorithm. and that it then uses encrypted data to overwrite the files. And finally, it sends the encryption key to the remote server. With this extra visibility, it is clear that it is easy for us to detect evasive checks. And we understand program behavior so deeply that it is much easier for us to detect malware. Next, let's look at VMware's network traffic analysis component. VMware uses AI to build models that allow detection of malicious network traffic. For this, they use a two-step process. In the first step, VMware applies unsupervised machine learning to all observable network traffic. This allows for the recognition of anomalies in the traffic and enables them to distinguish those anomalies from normal activity. But this is not enough. Not every anomaly is a threat. So in the second step, they apply threat-centric models to the anomalies. These models allow VMware to identify the true threats and remove those anomalies that are actually not security relevant. This significantly reduces false positives. VMware's threat-centric models are supervised machine learning. So how do they train them? This is where the sandbox comes in very handy. They leverage the labeled behaviors and network traffic that we generate by analyzing millions of samples every day. And we use VMware's deep security domain expertise to make sure that they pick the right features and suitable algorithms. The IDS, the sandbox, and the NTA component all generate events. But what really matters to a security analyst are not the low-level events. It is the active intrusions and the context around them. VMware's network detection and response components comb through all events. It identifies those events that are truly security relevant and then correlates them into intrusions. This correlation process allows us to connect the dots across multiple assets and across time, and they can produce timelines that show the progress and impact of each breach. Of course, a product is only as good as the team that builds it. VMware has worked really hard to assemble a team of world-class security researchers who have demonstrated their ability to innovate and push groundbreaking research. They know how to use AI and machine learning to build the best models to detect threats, both on the network and when analyzing files. VMware has a ton of data to feed these machine learning systems. The result is an advanced threat protection system that detects more threats in the data center than anyone else. NSX Service-Defined Firewall has the most complete protection and visibility across the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Intrinsically, VMware provides the most accurate detection and prevention of advanced threats entering and operating within your network while reducing false positives by up to 90%. And now I'm going to pass the ball over to Corey. Take it away, Corey.
Thank you, Justin. That was absolutely great. Hello, everyone, again. As Justin kind of outlined, NSX can be a really great tool that can be completely transformative for your environment in terms of how we segment, lock down, and really get understanding of what our data flow looks like, and so that we can flag anomalies within our environment that may or may not be malicious. But with any product that can be transformative, there's really a lot to learn, and it can be a daunting task to kind of understand, how do we rationalize that? How do we implement it and really kind of achieve our goals and objectives? And to help assist our clients with that, we've kind of developed a NSX design strategy workshop to really help you rationalize these things. And as we look at some of the key drivers for Insight developing this workshop, as Justin already alluded to, our attack surfaces are becoming bigger as we're bringing more applications into our environment, as we're embracing container and microservices and DevOps methodology. We're really opening the door for having more attack surfaces for malicious actors to kind of penetrate and attack. And all the while this is going on, we're receiving directives to kind of embrace the public cloud and build hybrid cloud environments. And yet our users' expectations of, the availability and the services and the security that we have in our environment really haven't changed. And that is really where our NSX-T workshop really starts coming to play, where we can sit down with you and your team and really get an understanding of where you're at today, what business challenges you're currently running into, and what you would hope to get out of a product like NSX-T. From there, we can really start breaking down the individual components. What does our NSX management tools look like? Where do we place those NSX management tools? Do we place it on our standard vSphere environment, or do we start embracing some of VMware's validated designs and adopt a dedicated management cluster so we can kind of lock down and restrict access to who has access to the management vCenter environment and would say the production vCenter environments or development vCenter environments. What do tools or appliances like the NSX Edge look like? Where do we place those? What advanced services are we going to turn on those edge appliances, things like NAT, distributed firewall, edge firewall, load balancer tools, and how many of those do we actually need? Some of those components and how many of those advanced services we turn on will help us define, how do we size that management cluster? What resources do we give those individual VMs? How do we size the NSX Edge environment? What tools will we be using on top of that to understand our data flow? Things like vRealize Network Insight. Are there other tools we'll be implementing in terms of, how do we identify big changes in terms of how our east-west traffic has changed between VMs? If we do have an infection like a ransomware attack, how will we be notified and how quickly can we be notified? One of the most eye-opening things of this particular presentation that Justin gave was that generally it takes 209 days for an attack to be kind of recognized and understand. And by that time, all the data that malicious actor wanted to pull from your environment has already been pulled. So what advanced tools do we implement so that we can catch those things much sooner than that 209 days, if not the day of, or even lockdown so we don't get infected at all? Is there really going to be container integration? So when we're setting up containers and microservices, how do we ensure that our developers, when they write that config file, the security policies that they put into place meet our standards? How do we even have visibility into what's being written in that config file? NSX offers tools that can help us assist with that. And are we going to be embracing and extending into the public cloud so that rules that we put on-premise in our vSphere environment, if we take those applications and move them to Azure, GCP, AWS, how do we ensure that we are just as secure in those public cloud environments as we are on-premise? And kind of once we've get all those understandings of the business objectives, we help you build that design out where we, have your base environment. Do we have management clusters? What does our edge environment look like? What are the applications and some of the services that we're going to be turning on? Is there going to be containers? And how do we extend into environments and communicate between things like Azure and AWS? And once we have that, we put the design together. It looks somewhat similar to what you're seeing here, even though this is just an example, so that we can, have an action plan in terms of how do we implement this in our environment and what the timeline around that and success criteria looks like. So thank you guys very much for joining us today. If you guys are interested in running this design workshop, please reach out to your Insight account executive and they will connect the dots so that we can kick off this design effort and have some pre-calls to get an understanding and work on what the next steps are.
Corey, it looks like we have a couple questions in the Q&A. Would you like to address those?
Sure.
Yep, sorry about that. I was also looking at those. So it looks like the first question is, does NSX-T integrate into SIM? And does it do so either via API or syslog? But yes, the answer is it typically will do that via syslog. I know you can integrate with Splunk and you know, definitely log insight from VMware as well. You know, NSX has an open API, so there may be some additional functionality that is available via the API, depending on what SIM you're talking about. So there is integration with most SIMs out there. And then I'm not so EDR product. So NSX-T really is it's not really a supplemental product. It's a virtualized networking and security suite of products. So think, you know, back when virtualized compute was first coming on the scene and ESXi came out, that kind of revolutionized the way that we think about what a server is. From a bare metal box, now we think of, you know, most servers are thought of as a virtual machine that exists kind of in a subjective space, right? It's virtualized. So NSX does the same thing for networking and security, really. So it takes those components that are typically thought of as, you know, hardware networking and security components like firewalls, load balancers, you know, routers, switches, things like that, and it virtualizes them. And then it allows you to build virtual networks that are highly secure and even in some cases virtually air-gapped.
Yeah, and so one piece to add to that, Justin. So NSX by itself really just kind of changes, you know, where the security can kind of sit. Where generally, if we, you know, implement the distributed firewall, that security sits on the VNIC in front of every VM. So it's really the traffic cop in front of every VM, opposed to at the, you know, the internet edge, or having to kind of hairpin to an external IDS/IPS appliance. And that can also extend to, you know, would say our virtual desktop environment, where we can integrate with, you know, third-party security plugins, and implement things like guest introspection, so that we can once again have that security on that in front of the VNIC of our VM itself.
Thanks. And there was one more question.
Yeah, it looks like there was another question about where VMware is acquiring their signatures from. And I am pulling a brain fart here because I'm not remembering exactly the name of the source that they get them. I'm trying to look that up real quick for you guys here, but let's see here.
Maybe we can follow up with that question directly as well.
Yeah, that's fine. That'll be no problem. We can follow up with an email on that one.
Okay, sounds great. I don't see any other questions on here, so we just want to thank everyone for joining. We really appreciate all the attendance and the great questions that we got. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available within 2 to 3 days of the webcast. You'll receive an email notification once the recording is available. Thank you again for participating in today's webcast.